SharePoint Autofill columns are an incredibly useful tool, and with the new inclusion of SharePoint metadata into what Microsoft 365 Copilot can see, their value has skyrocketed even further. But they have a frustrating flaw. When you add a new autofill column, it doesn't just run on all your existing data, and there's no way to automatically reprocess a whole library. Sure, you can select a bunch of files and process them together, but for big libraries this is impractical. So if you're trying to use autofill to up your metadata game on all your existing data, what's the solution? In this video, I'm going to walk through how to automatically initiate autofill processing on libraries or individual files using Power Automate, so you can integrate autofill into your document automations, even on the largest SharePoint libraries. Keep watching to find out how. My name is Nick DeCourcy. I'm a Microsoft 365 consultant who specialises in AI adoption for small and medium-sized businesses. I'm also a Microsoft MVP for Microsoft 365 Copilot. If you're interested in keeping up with AI advancements, make sure you get subscribed to the channel and drop this video a like so you get to see more from me in the future. And if you're interested in working with me, check out the links down in the video description to get in contact. The need for a solution to this problem started with a client project where we were working with document libraries containing 5,000 plus documents that needed metadata to be added using autofill. There were two issues I needed to address. First, there was no way in the UI to directly address 5,000 documents nested in folders to initiate autofill processing. And second, not all prior documents needed processing, as this might be prohibitively expensive. SharePoint Autofill itself is part of SharePoint Premium, aka Microsoft Syntex. Access to this is now via pay-as-you-go access, but licensing is a little complicated by the fact that access to autofill is also ceded to Microsoft 365 Copilot users because of the new knowledge agent. In this video, I'm presupposing pay-as-you-go access for the solution we'll look at, and I haven't tested leveraging this using access conveyed by Microsoft 365 Copilot, as frankly, the scope and limits of this are unclear. I may make a follow-up or post on LinkedIn with specific information on that licensing scenario. However, those of you with experience of Knowledge Agent might be screaming at the screen that this product solves the problem I've outlined. That's what's implied, but the reality is that it doesn't seem to. Knowledge Agent will help you organise a library with appropriate autofill columns and demonstrate what this looks like for the first 20 files, but it doesn't, as far as I'm aware, give you any new ability to autofill the rest. Let me know down in the comments if you know something I'm missing. As I reviewed the autofill documentation, I was actually surprised to learn there was no Microsoft documented solution to this problem. Bulk processing is called out as a feature to be expected in a future release, but no timeline for this is highlighted. For right now at least, we are on our own to make this happen. The solution I came upon was included in this fantastic write-up of various autofill capabilities by Microsoft MVP Leon Armston. But while this clearly laid out a way to automatically process autofill on documents, it did so by accessing the SharePoint API via PowerShell. This is a great solution, but one that might well put off many not familiar with PowerShell. And if your existing automation approaches are rooted in Power Automate, it's difficult to integrate alongside. I recommend you read Leon's work, and the blog post reference here is linked in the video description. To demo this solution, I set up a SharePoint document library containing 100 AI-generated invoices. I then added an autofill column to simply extract the invoice number from each file. As with all my demos, this uses example data and you never see any private information. So taking the API call Leon developed and porting this from PowerShell over to Power Automate is straightforward. We have an action in Power Automate that we can use to send an HTTP request to the SharePoint API, and we can simply use this to pass the request he found over to the required API endpoint. This is authenticated within the SharePoint connector, so we don't need to worry about the process of getting an access token. We would if we just started with a vanilla HTTP request action from scratch. And we could use this same approach to find the site ID or web ID we need as parameters for the request, using the site and web API endpoints respectively, and selecting the ID parameter to be returned from each. In this case, I'm targeting autofill on a specific file using its unique ID. This one is for invoice 1 in this library. I had to already extract the unique ID of the file for this example, but if I run the flow, it will run against that single file. And while you can see that the file does indeed get updated, there's no practical benefit to this approach without integrating it with further automation. In my case, I had two criteria. I wanted to process documents that had been edited within the last 90 days and where autofill processing had not yet occurred. I also wanted to ensure I ignored folders, as one of my key issues was that all of my content was nested in folders. Finding the required files can be achieved with a simple SharePoint search. I search within this document library I'm targeting. This is a getByTitle attribute and is the display name of the library, and then I select a number of columns I need for my processing. If I wanted to, I could filter based on the modified date as I suggested, but I haven't included that here for simplicity. But I am ensuring that the file system object type, or FSOBS type, is 0 to collect only files and not folders. And I ignore any files where the prime classification status, that tells us whether autofill has already run or not, is null or failed. I expand on the related column file to ensure I get back my unique ID I need, which can be a little hidden. And then we can pass this to an apply to each step to run through the autofill processing, with the unique ID changing for each iteration of the run. Depending on your file volume, you might also want to crank concurrency here. In this case, I've throttled this down to 50 files, as I have 100 in my library, so it's for the purposes of this demo. But for large libraries, paging down at a manageable number makes sense. And because you can set up these filters however you'd like, you can manage both how hard you are hitting the API and how much it's costing you. If I run the flow and then jump back over to my document library, you can see that within a few minutes, roughly half the documents have been autofilled. Now, it's important for me to point out, just as Leon did in his blog, that this isn't a documented approach to addressing this problem. However, given that so far all we've done is run it on a one-time basis to catch up a library that hasn't been autofilled, I'd feel comfortable using this after some testing. However, there are things you could do with this that are a little more out of the box when it comes to undocumented features. One of the things this approach does do is that it opens up the door to hydrate your archive data flexibly with enhanced metadata using autofill rather than having to take huge document libraries and process everything at once. For example, I could process autofill on an entire folder when any document in that folder gets updated. Or I could consider certain file names only. Autofill isn't expensive by any means, it costs half a penny a page processed, but if you've got 10,000 documents each of 10 pages, that's $500 processing fee. It's not unreasonable to think you might want to constrain that budget a little. However, if Microsoft ever decided to change something, you'd be out of luck in getting any support for this type of process. One big limitation of autofill is that it's either on or it's not, so you cannot filter what gets autofill applied to it in terms of newly created files, although you can choose whether to run it on only new files or those that are modified too. If this is the type of solution you need, then it's entirely possible to create your own AI-based autofill tool using Power Automate and access to another AI model. In fact, I have one client who has been running their own custom SharePoint autofill tool leveraging the Claude API for several months, which gives you far more flexibility and access to better models. And if you want to automate autofill processing on an ongoing basis in a way that's different to Microsoft's default, this might be a better path, as you can do it using 100% documented and supported capabilities. So there you have it. This may well be a niche need, but if you do have this requirement, I hope this video was useful. And my thanks to Leon for all the legwork in the technical solution, which I only retranslated into Power Automate. Thanks for watching through to the end. Until the next video, bye bye.